Hi everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Lauren, and today I am going to be discussing all of the books that I read in January. So January was actually a pretty good reading month. I've read 9 books in January. One of those though, I DNF'd, and I am in the middle of another one. I'm in the middle of The Way of Kings. I'm doing a Stormlight Archive read along, and so I'm roughly a third of the way through Way of Kings. I think I'm through chapter 24. So I completed 7 books, and I read a grand total of 2,267 pages. And as far as stars go, the DNF, then I gave 2 3 stars, 3 3.5 stars, 1 4.5 star, and 1 5 star. So kind of all over the place. I would say though, by and large, I really enjoyed everything I read, aside from the book that I DNF'd, which I DNF'd for some pretty unusual reasons, which I'll get to here in a minute. I feel pretty pleased with January, it being the first month of 2022. I feel like I started off on a great foot, and especially because the book that I gave 5 stars, I think it is one of the best books I've ever read. So I'm very, very pleased with my January reading. I will leave links down in the description box for all of these books if you are interested in learning more about them. Let's jump into the books that I read in January. Okay, so first things first, the book that I DNF'd was Intensity by Dean Koontz. This book is a thriller novel. If you are into thrillers, this is like top-notch tension. It is sort of the serial killer variety. I really enjoyed Dean Koontz's writing style. I've never read anything by him before, and I thought that his writing was great. The amount of dread and tension and excitement that he built up, I thought it was, he did a fantastic job of it. However, this book specifically, which honestly, this might be a little bit of a spoiler. I have to give a very mild spoiler in order to explain why I DNF'd this book. I don't know, I'll just put the spoiler thing up here. This is a book of the serial killer variety, and specifically it is about a man who basically targets women and sort of tortures and murders them. It was really more than I could bear. I think I got about halfway into the book and it was too harrowing for me to handle. I enjoy horror and I enjoy thriller, and I can handle body horror and slashers and blood and guts and supernatural. I can handle all of that stuff, but for me, this was something that I can't handle it. I read it as long as I could handle it, and I had to stop. All that being said, it is a good book. Like, it's written well and the suspense in it is fantastic, but if that is something that would also bother you, just know going into it that it might not work for you either for those reasons. So yeah, had to DNF Intensity. The next book up the list is The Haunting of Tram Car 015 by Pijale Clark. This is a book, it is kind of, I would call it sort of a sci-fi horror fusion, and it has like a mystery in it, and it is exactly what it sounds like. It is about a tram car that is haunted, and I guess kind of a detective and his partner trying to figure it out. It was actually a pretty fun book. This is a novella. I think it's a little over 50 pages long, and it had almost an Agatha Christie kind of quality about it as far as like the mystery aspect of it. The main character had this sort of Hercule Poirot thing going on that I really enjoyed. This book, I actually ended up giving it 3 stars. 3 stars, that's pretty good for me. That's a pretty middle of the road book for me. But the reason I didn't give it more stars was mostly because I felt like this book really, really could have benefited from being longer. I really liked the characters in this book specifically, and I would have liked to have seen them developed a little bit more. Pijale Clark's writing style I also really enjoyed. I thought it was very accessible and easy to follow along, and it was just an inventive and creative story. I wished it would have been longer. You know, it felt like as soon as things started heating up, it was over. So yeah, I mean, overall, it was a good book, but I wish it had just been a little bit more. So yeah, 3 stars for The Haunting of Tram Car 015. The next book up the list is Oh Pain by Kyle Winkler. This is a short story collection. I would call it kind of an experimental horror. I had a live discussion about this book with Steve Talks Books, which I will, if I can link it in the cards, I'll put a link up here to that discussion video if you want to learn more, or it'll be down in the video description box. I'm not sure which one. But it was a very unusual book. The stories like I said, they had this sort of experimental kind of avant-garde quality to them. Not like anything I have absolutely ever read before. Very, very unusual. And this book was perfect for discussions, because some of the stories in there were very out there and just something you want to talk to someone about and kind of try to pull apart and understand. I think the book had like 12 or 13 stories in total. I really connected to, I would say, like really deeply connected to about 3 of them, although I would say there were probably about 5 or 6 that I really, really enjoyed. There were another handful of them that I think were kind of, I didn't really get them, and then a couple that I was like not into at all. So it kind of ran the gambit for me. After a lot of deliberation on this book, I've decided to give it 3 stars. It's such a strange book, and I really appreciate how unusual it was, but in the end, it is a short story collection. Some of them worked better for me than others, so I feel like when I averaged my thoughts on all of them all together, 3 stars, middle of the road, that's what you get. So 3 stars for O Pain. The next book up the line is Ghost City Girl by Simon Paul Wilson. This is another book that I read with Steve Talks Books, which I will leave it in the cards or down in the video description box, our discussion on this. I discussed this with him and Stacy's All Booked. So it was actually a really great discussion. This is also sort of a fusion type of, it fuses a couple genres together, sort of a cyberpunk sci-fi set in this futuristic cyberpunk world, but it's really more of like a horror story set in this cyberpunk world. The story is set in Japan, and it's more or less about this sort of threat of these malevolent spirits sort of taking over the city. And it's about our protagonist and her friends trying to handle that, and stuff happens. I think I ended up giving this 3.5 stars. Cyberpunk is one of my favorite genres. I just think it's so fun and interesting, and I love horror. Like, I just love the mashup of these genres, very unusual, and I feel like the story itself was also really unusual, very creative, just very unlike anything that I've read before. I did, however, have some small issues with the exposition in this book. I felt like the exposition was just a little bit sloppy. Speaking in terms of kind of like the magic system of this book, so to speak, or sort of how the supernatural works in this world. I think there's actually sort of a trope for this, although I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. But whenever characters' abilities are sort of revealed in the moment, rather than it sort of being built into this world from the beginning, as the circumstance needs it, oh, this character is able to do this thing. And you're like, whoa, wait, what? That's possible in this world. And that happened a few times throughout the book. I want the rules early on so I know what is possible, rather than it kind of that sort of happening to explain things and to further the plot. But setting that aside, like I said, overall, this was a really fun book. It is the first in a series. I don't know if I'll read on or not. But yeah, overall, really enjoyed this book. Yeah, so 3.5 stars for Ghost City Girl. The next book on the list is Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. And this was actually the first book that I read in January. And honestly, this was a really good one to start with, because it is also a cyberpunk sci-fi novel. Like I said, one of my favorite subgenres. This is an OG cyberpunk novel. This, I think it came out, it was originally released in like the early 90s. This is really a VR story, like this advanced VR is possible in this world. And it is about this cyber drug called Snow Crash. And it's kind of a cyber drug and also a computer virus, and how it threatens the people in this world. I'm not going to go into great detail about it. This is actually a fairly complex story. The first book by Neil Stephenson that I read was Seven Eves. The issues that I had with that book are kind of the issues that I had with this, although I think I actually enjoyed this more than Seven Eves. I gave this 3.5 stars. This is only my second novel by Neil Stephenson, but it sounds like it's pretty common for his novels to start out very strong and start to kind of jiggle apart as they go. This is a fascinating world that this is set in, and I would say the first half to 2/3 of it were like really riveting, and then it kind of started to go off the rails just a little bit, and it started to lose my interest a little bit. Since it came out in the 90s, the style of writing, it's a little bit dated of a style of writing, but it's still, this is a fun read. If you're into cyberpunk and you have not read this book before, like I said, this is an OG cyberpunk novel. It's a fun one, so I definitely recommend you pick it up. So yeah, 3.5 stars for Snow Crash. The next book up the list is Tales from the Loop by Simon Stålenhag. This is a dystopian story, and as you can see by the sticker on the book, that this is an Amazon show now, which is a very, very good show. I've watched a few episodes of it, and it is fantastic. This book is set in Sweden, and it is about this area of the countryside in Sweden that is affected, sort of the aftermath of this company that had built a particle accelerator beneath the earth. It's very, very eerie. It is broken into multiple little short stories, and it is full of just some of the most beautiful illustrations. In fact, this book, it is worth owning for the illustrations alone. I mean, I think Simon Stålenhag, he wrote the book, and he did all of the illustrations or the paintings for it. And they're so beautiful. This book, and it also has kind of a 1980s flavor. It's sort of set in 1980s, the kind of suburbia. This book I ended up giving 3.5 stars. The illustrations are so good. They're like 5+ stars for sure. You know, it's like a short story collection basically. And, you know, you connect more to some than others at times. If you are into art and design but also really into sort of dystopian stories, then this is definitely worth getting a hold of. So yeah, 3.5 stars for Tales from the Loop. The next book on my list is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, who also wrote The Martian. This is a sci-fi novel. It's kind of a space opera, so to speak. And I'm not going to say too much about this book because it is the memory loss trope, which if you know me at all at this point, you know that's one of my all-time favorite tropes. And by saying too much about it, it'll be pretty spoilery. So what I will say about this book is that it is about a man who wakes up on a spaceship. He has no idea where he is or who he is, how he got where he is. He is completely blank in his memory. The book is mostly about him sort of figuring out what's going on and who he is and how he got to where he's at. And also sort of an unlikely ally that he ends up forming in order to survive. There is a very good reason why this is, you know, at the top of so many booktubers like favorite lists for 2021. This is such a good book. It's just heartwarming. And much like The Martian, it has really great scientific explanations for a lot of the stuff that happens in this book, which I'm no scientist, but I do appreciate a lot of the things happening kind of being backed up with evidence that it's possible that they can happen. Andy Weir has this way of the way he writes these sort of survival stories. You know, people, I think, kind of give him a hard time for repeating concepts and stories. But like, he does it so well. So why shouldn't he? It was a fun read. Like, it was a super exciting read. I gave this book 4.5 stars, which that is a very good rating for me. I absolutely loved it. This was a great book. So if you are into sci-fi and if you have had any inkling to give this book a shot, I definitely recommend that you do. This is an absolutely worthwhile read. And, you know, I absolutely love The Martian, but I love this every bit as much, maybe even more so. So yeah, I definitely recommend Project Hail Mary. So yeah, 4.5 stars for Project Hail Mary. All right, so we have made it to the last book on my list. My favorite book that I read in January, and honestly, probably one of my favorite books that I have ever read, and that is The Electric State by Simon Stålenhag. So Tales from the Loop and The Electric State are in the same series. It's a series of 3 books. Tales from the Loop is the first one, and The Electric State is the third one. You don't have to read them in order. They're not connected. Oh my gosh, this book, it just broke me. It was so just devastating and beautiful. Tales from the Loop is set in Sweden in the 80s. This is set in the United States in the late 90s. And it is about a young woman and her robot companion who are traveling across the countryside for a reason that we aren't aware of through most of the story. It becomes clear towards the end. Tales from the Loop was sort of a collection of little short stories, little snippets, but this is one cohesive narrative. And this sort of alternate history, so to speak, the United States, all the people in the United States have gotten really addicted to this VR game, I guess. The people have become like zombies. They put on these VR headsets and basically never take them off because the addiction to it is so strong. You're observing the fallout from such a thing happening through this young woman and her robot's eyes. You don't know why they're traveling across the country. You don't know. There's definitely, you get a sense of urgency about it, but you're not really sure why. And whenever it becomes clear, the tears I cried when I finished this book, I would probably put this in my top 5 books that I have ever read. This, much like Tales from the Loop, the artwork, it's even better in my opinion. The artwork in this is even more impressive than from Tales from the Loop. And I could just gush and gush and gush and gush about this book, but I'm going to reel it in and stop there. You've got to buy this book. Like, this is one of those that I want to scream about it from the rooftops. This is so good, this book. Oh, this is so good. Very, very easy and well-earned 5 stars for The Electric State. So I think that is going to be it for me today. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of January. I would be curious to know if you have read any of them and what you thought about them. So please talk to me about these books in the comments down below. If you read anything that you found particularly interesting in January, tell me about it down below because I am always looking for my next great read. If you enjoyed this video, I hope that you will like it and possibly subscribe, and I will see you next time.